I tell you something though that
All defensive units into Sector 15.
welcome to Daikaiju Network podcast where we have a healthy obsession with kaiju. I am your co-host Kent, and with me is your other co-host.
Jason, how's it going?
So for the first time in a little while, we're going to be talking about a movie, and this is a movie that I think ever since Sonny Chiba's passing recently has kind of slowly started creeping in to what's so funny.
Just with you saying for the first time we're talking about a movie.
Meaning we're having a discussion. We're not doing
Haven't
a
we
commentary.
always been talking about a movie? But
That's
joking aside.
Look at what you made me do. I lasted 11 years, and that's all it took to get me off.
Joking aside.
But anyways, this is a movie that I think has started to slowly creep in to becoming more noticeable by fans of Sonny Chiba and fans kind of like us and some of you that are listening to this who are enjoying Japanese sci-fi cinema and the like, and that is Invasion of the Neptune Men. This was a movie that was released in 1961, so a fairly early film. I mean, obviously, if you've seen it already in preparation for this discussion, or if you saw it way before this whole podcast that we're doing here, released in 1961. Sonny Chiba obviously looks very young. This is a few years before his movie that I really love. I've always called it a guilty pleasure of mine, and that is The Golden Bat. That's one of my guilty pleasure films of all time. Um, and so, Jason, I guess before we even um, get to discussing the film, is there any housekeeping or anything that you want um, to discuss or need to discuss?
Yeah, as far as the whole live stream situation, that if I can uh, do something here pretty quick here. Um, yeah, so as far as the streaming situation, we're still having some problems with our YouTube uh, ordeal. For some reason, still not able to stream live uh, for that regard. So right now, just live streaming via on Twitch, DLive, Facebook, and Periscope. And you can subscribe to us on those. And you can also like and subscribe all of our videos on our YouTube page still. We're still uploading videos through there. And as far as our audio versions of the podcast, you can find us over at Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, as well as Tune In. And before we dive into the invasion of Neptune Men, I just stumbled upon this little article here. It's from Sci-Fi Japan, and it's talking about a first look into a upcoming Daikaiju movie called Yuzo, the biggest battle in Tokyo. And I'm not sure for you, Ken, if you have um, Twitch or something uh, going on your end, and it's just kind of talking about an exclusive first look into a obviously Daikaiju movie uh, from filmmaker Yoshikazu Ishii, and he was an apprentice of the late Toho via visual effects. I can't talk right now.
The late Toho
Director
Vietnam veteran.
Koichi Kawakita, and served as a special effects assistant director on Godzilla Final Wars. Was it Negotiator, Mashita, Masayoshi Daimajin Canon, and Ultraman Mabius. And so it's just kind of talking a little bit of this upcoming Daikaiju film and showing some pictures and the like, as well as a list of credits and the staff there. And I'm not sure when this is going to be coming out. If I can just kind of scroll along here, from what I'm seeing here, there isn't a set date here. Yeah, as far as the cast here, we got Kenhiko Fujita, Takashi Toyota, Takuya Fujisaki, Bako Maeda, Harunobu Nomura, and so on and so forth. And then I think I saw some familiar names here. Yeah, Kenji Sakama, who appeared in Gamera 2 and other films. And yeah, so other than that, the look of the monster here, I'm assuming, is Yuzo. It looks pretty unique in a way. Kind of has that Ultraman-esque look to it. So I don't know if you have anything else that you want to add to this. Otherwise, we can just
This is
move
the
on.
first time hearing about it.
Yeah, same for me. I just heard about this. Oh gosh, about a little over 30 minutes ago. So
Noob.
look who's talking.
All right, so we're going to go ahead and discuss our movie for this episode. In the US, it's titled Invasion of the Neptune Men, and it was picked up by Walter Manley in 1964, dubbed into English. Anyone who thinks maybe that name Walter Manley sounds familiar, it is because they picked up the Starman serials from the late 50s, and they ended up editing and dubbing those and what have you as well. And I knew immediately, and this is the second time I've seen the film, and um, when I first saw this movie earlier this week for the podcast, I think the last time I had seen it may have been 3 or so years earlier. So it had been a while. But when I saw the title card come up for the movie, I knew immediately, like, this had to be Walter Manley. And then, of course, after the title screen faded away and they started doing the credits for the film, Walter Manley was like the second or third card to come up. And so immediately I was just kind of like, okay, yeah, Walter Manley. And I kind of like what they do with the dubbing job. The name of the movie in Japanese is pronounced Uchu Kaisoku Sen, if I I'm not a native Japanese
Kai
speaker or anything.
Kaitoku-sen.
Yeah, I'm not a Japanese speaker, which kind of roughly translates into the Space Greyhound. Uh, Filmed and produced by Toei, and of course, Toei also did Golden Bat a few years later. So here's
Well,
the plot.
one of the things that when I was first seeing this for the very first time, that the way that it looked like, for some reason, sort of thought it was a Starman movie until oh, Iron Sharp as a superhero is called, and it was like, nope, it's not a Starman movie at all.
But he's called Space Chief in in English. So I'm going to read the synopsis off of the Wikipedia page here. Astronomer Shinichi Tachibana, played by Sony Chiba, has a secret identity as superhero Iron Sharp, or Space Chief in English, and has many children as friends. When they are attacked by a group of metallic aliens, or Neptune Men in the English dub, Iron Sharp drives the aliens away. The resourceful Tachibana helps develop an electric barrier to block the aliens from coming to Earth. After several losses by the aliens, they announce that they will invade the Earth, throwing the world into a state of panic. The aliens destroy entire cities with their mothership and smaller fighters. After Iron Sharp destroys multiple enemy ships, Japan fires a nuclear missile at the mothership, destroying it, and the world is saved. So, like I said, this is my second time seeing the film. Jason, because this is your first time, sort of tell us what your expectations were coming into this. Like, have you heard of it before? Just kind of what were your expectations coming into this film?
Um, Not much. I didn't really have much expectations at all. That's just with that few second pause. That's all I can say about it. So I've only heard it briefly, maybe a few times over the years, and I'm not. I know I've seen a lot of the Mystery Science Theater 3000 episodes over the last several years, but I don't even think I've even seen their episode of Invasion of Neptune Men. Um, so with that, I just didn't really have much expectations going into this. Like I said earlier, I thought that this was a Starman movie the way it looked, but yeah, just it wasn't the case. So that's all I can say.
Okay, so kind of now, sort of in a nutshell, what are your impressions now of the film, without like going deep, like into a final thought type of deal? Like, in a nutshell, what are your thoughts, of this film after seeing it for the first time?
Um, I don't know, just I was just sort of bored with it. It was sort of good at first with everyone getting involved and stuff, but then just with the ending, like towards the end, I I was just sort of out of it. It just felt really boring and just you know it felt like Latitude Zero in a way, especially with that whole chase scene in there. It's just sort of like this. It's just spaceships just going all over the place. Not much dialogue here. Uh, it was just very boring to me.
So for me, um, I this movie is available on YouTube, free to watch. So those of you who may not own the DVD can go ahead freely and find it and watch it there. I bought the DVD. It was a double feature, and it's called Drive-In Double Feature, something like that. And it's got this movie along with Prince of Space on it. And Prince of Space, if you thought this movie was dull, if I remember correctly, again, it's been 3 or 4 years. If I remember correctly, I think Prince of Space may have even been more dull than this film. And at some point, I would like for us to cover that film as well. But second time viewing Invasion of the Neptune Men, uh, ki- I did find myself inadvertently spacing off and focusing on a few other things
That
occasionally,
was like
which
me, yeah.
and the weird thing about that though is that this movie, yes, it occasionally has moments where it kind of slows a bit, but it's not a very long movie. I think it's like 75 minutes if I remember.
Yeah, according to
So,
YouTube, for me, it was about right around an hour, 15 minutes.
yeah, so it's not very long, but there are a couple moments where it gets a little slow, nothing overly slow, but at the same time there's some decent action. I think kind of what the problem is with this film is that Toei, I think more or less wanted this to be a kids film because there are six kids we see pretty frequently throughout the course of this movie that are Space Chief, Iron Sharp, whatever you want to call him. They're the kids that befriend him and what have you. I think more or less this was kind of a kids type of film, and uh, and I don't know when Toei came into business or anything like that. The Tokusatsu genre was kind of relatively new still at that point in Japan.
Yeah,
Um,
they were founded in 1938, so about uh
Not quite 30 years.
yeah,
Yeah.
well, yeah.
And um, I just kind of wonder if Toei, to a certain extent, and I don't know their entire history or anything like that, I almost wonder if this is sort of one of their initial toe dippings into this particular genre and not exactly sure how to go about producing a more livelier film. Because one thing that um, that needs to be known is that this movie was produced, including Golden Bat a few years later, was produced at a time in which Sony Chiba wasn't quite popular yet. He was going back and forth between TV and film during most of the 60s. It wasn't until about the late 60s that he really became popular. And that's kind of when more or less he kind of did strictly film by that point. Um, and I just kind of wonder if Toei was, this may have been one of their earlier films in which they were just dipping their toes in, trying to get a feel for it, and maybe this was just kind of, kind of like a lot of first endeavors. It's very, uh, it's haphazard. It's missing a lot of things, but at the same time, I have to admit, this film is very unique. It's very interesting in that it's a typical alien invasion film, but I like the costumes despite the fact they're partially ridiculous for the Neptune Men. I
It almost felt
like
like the Forbidden Planet in a way, especially how the Neptune men
kind
were
of. Um,
dressed up.
I like a lot of the spaceship sets. I think those are pretty cool. Sony Chiba's Space Chief suit is kind of cool, kind of hokey at the same time, but still unique. His spaceship is nothing more than a tricked out car.
A
I
space
mean, I
car.
kid you. Yeah, I mean, I kid you not. Like when you first see him, you're like, oh, he's coming in a rocket, and then it lands. It's nothing more than a car that has been retrofitted to look like a spaceship. It's one of the silliest things you're gonna see in this film.
And one of the things I want to point out too is that while I was watching this film and I was trying to figure out who made this, what studio made this movie, but then when I heard the sound effects for this, it was the very same sound effects that were used in Golden Bat. It was like I I wouldn't be a bit surprised if Toei was a studio behind this. And sure enough, when you mentioned about it, it was like, yep, that confirmed it for me. But yeah, as far as me spacing out it for this movie and stuff, I think it was just more or less kind of the whole staff behind it. As far it just felt like they didn't quite know what direction that they want this film to go, and it just and even the cast, they just seem sort of lost at times. There were some moments where they felt like that they had some sort of chemistry, but overall they just seemed like they just didn't even know what was going on from time to
The
time.
the film the film, considering it feels longer than it actually is, one of two things should have happened. Either certain scenes should have been cut, either partially or entirely,
Particularly the ending should have been cut. If that felt like it
or
dragged down way too much.
well, I don't know why you would want to cut the ending. That's kind of one of the periods of the movie in which the most action
I'm talking
happens.
about shortening it up. It felt like it just lasted way too long the way it should have been. Plus, there was barely any dialogue in there at all.
Well, yeah. And again, like I said earlier, I wonder if this is one of Toei's earlier endeavors at attempting a special effects film. Um, but yeah, either certain things should have been trimmed or cut entirely, or certain things should have been rewritten. Obviously, I think certain things should have been expanded. Unless I missed something, I don't ever recall seeing or hearing anything about Sony Chiba's Shinichi Tachibana character being the space chief. Like, he doesn't come out and like wink at the kids or wink at the
Yeah,
camera or anything like that.
I sort of assumed his character was the Iron Sharp or Space Chief, for that
Yeah.
matter. But it didn't really confirm it towards the end or something of the sort. I was kind of expecting that.
Yeah, and it makes me wonder if either something was filmed and they cut it, or maybe they didn't have the time to cut it because maybe they had a very short shooting schedule,
I
or
assume that they probably did originally film some sort of scene with him being the Iron Sharp, but then in the end, someone made the decision to just kind of say, "Oh, let's just sort of keep it a mystery or something."
see, the thing is, I'm more inclined to believe that we're supposed to think they are two different characters. That's what I'm thinking the studio or the director wants us to think about the film, that even though anybody who is familiar with like Sony Chiba's facial features can point out easily that he's
Mm-hmm.
the one who's space chief.
Mm.
And
Right.
again, it just leads me to believe that with this particular film, that I think we are supposed to believe they're two separate characters. But then, and this is by no means a perfect movie. In some cases, this movie is kind of a mess in a few
Mm-hmm.
areas.
Right.
Because, not like I just said, are we supposed to believe whether or not his character is also Space Chief? Is that one of the things? If it is, then they messed up big time on that.
And
And
sort of
another
my
thing too is Space Chief never comes in contact with the scientist. Space Chief is also OP'd, and he disappears for like a large chunk of the film.
well, and that's sort of my criticism too, as far as the staff behind the film, that it just felt like they just didn't even know what direction they wanted to go with this movie, and hence why it felt like the cast in this film didn't quite have the chemistry with one another.
Well, yeah, and again, because of the six kids in this movie, I would argue they are more the main characters than Sony Chiba is and anyone else in this film. You know how kids movies are, and I know this isn't really a good excuse for haphazard or terrible writing. But in a lot of kids' films, a lot of writers and directors and stuff are kind of like, well, it doesn't matter about some of the details and some of the continuities because kids are more in tune with the action, more specifically boys. This would be a film that probably would um, be more entertaining to boys than it would be girls, and as a result they just want to see like weird creatures and action and things like that. And look,
Hmm.
when I was a kid, that's all I cared about too, about a lot of my movies. Like if it was a dinosaur movie, it's like I want to see the dinosaurs, I don't want to see the people, I don't care about what their plight is, I just want to see the dinosaurs.
Hmm.
um, But like I said, that's not necessarily an excuse for mediocre or bad writing. And the unfortunate thing, though, is because this is such an obscure film that there's very little in the way in terms of any information or what have you on the film. So we just don't know. And excuse me. It's very interesting. I think this is a film where, sadly, despite the fact that there are quite a few things going on most of the time, they do spend too much time, I think, lingering in a few areas because a lot of time is definitely spent around this electric barrier around the city, designing it and setting it up to the point to where it covers and protects the city well enough from the Neptune Men. One of the things I kind of want to make fun of a little bit is the initial meeting of Space Chief and the Neptune Men, in which the fight choreography is absurd.
Are you talking
This is,
about the beginning where they first meet up?
yeah,
Yeah.
this is definitely Sony Chiba before he became Sony Chiba Street Fighter. I mean, the martial arts is very pedestrian. The Neptune Men don't do much of anything except get kicked and then get up and they kind of walk a little bit with their arms a bit
We're like,
extended out to the
oh.
sides. I like the Neptune Men though. I mean, look, they don't really do a whole lot. They're more active and vocal when they're in their spaceship later trying to make the assault on the city. Uh, but they don't do next to anything. And again, I think part of it is just the writing, just the fact that this may have been one of their first science fiction movies, and they just didn't exactly know what to do. Um, Budget could be a concern too. Maybe they're like, look, we can't do a whole lot of special effects or make a lot of props or what have you. I mean, it could be a combination of all sorts of things as well. But it, I saw that and I kind of chuckled, and then it kept going on for a little while, and then I thought to myself, I'm like, oh no, like if this is how like some of the action set pieces are going to be, this is going to be eye rolling. Like it's kind of funny when you first see it, but then if it keeps going, and then if this is the sort of thing that continues to happen over the course of the movie, this is going to be something else.
I would say the only thing that I really enjoyed when watching this movie is the practical effects as well as the visual effects. The practical effects, as well as them doing kind of like the matte screen or the rotoscope, whatever that they had there, melding sort of the live scenes with the practical effects, with the buildings exploding and all that. It was really good for the time that it that this film was made. It almost looked like a lot of that stuff coexisted with one another. You didn't really see much of the scenes, or didn't look really outdated for that, and it looked like it aged really well for this for the movie that it is. And of course, I gotta mention
I know what's coming.
the Hitler cutout on a building before it blows up. I have Whoever made the decision of adding a Hitler cutout on a practical on a
No,
miniature building before blowing up.
I almost wonder if that was real footage of something.
It did not look like it because it blew up right when.
Was Toei trying to send a message about something? Like,
I have no idea.
yeah,
I'm
that
sure
I
that there was
noticed
some.
that too, and
I'm
I saw
sure
the
that there was some sort of hidden meaning behind it, or some kind of inside joke or whatever. But
yeah, it was the most random thing. Like I told Jason like a little while ago, I was just kind of like, why in the fuck would there be like Hitler type stuff? You know, granted, like I know during World War II, like Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan kind of had like an alliance of sorts going on,
mhm.
but still, like For something like that to be so random, in which it's a movie that's nothing about World War II, nothing about that. It's just a standard alien invasion
It
film.
was like it was just
It's
put there out of nowhere.
yeah, it's just what the hell? Like it's just I kind of had to laugh because again, it's just one of those things that's so stupidly absurd. You just don't expect. And again, I had seen this before, but it's been a few years. You would think I would remember that. Now I will because it just I must have been spacing off maybe during that scene a few years ago. But yeah, it's just so random out of left field. It's just I don't know. So let's get into some more specifics here. We already talked a little bit about the effects. I think you and I are in the agreement. Oh, actually, one more thing I want to talk about before we get into more specifics here. One thing that happened in the film that I think maybe Golden Bat borrowed from is there's this moment in which a laser shoots a tree, and Neptune men end up being disguised as soldiers in the self defense force, and you can tell that they are the aliens because they got like mascara or whatever on their face. It sort of reminds me a little bit of Golden Bat, in which in that movie, I think one or two characters were replicated in that film and were the villains as well. I kind of found that whole sequence kind of interesting in the fact that in several moments when they shot self-defense soldiers, the filmmakers did a very good job of outlining the bodies of the soldiers that got shot. Like it was incredibly perfect. I mean, it was fun because you're like, oh, okay, things are finally coming together for the Neptune men. We're finally going to get a real shot at this because really throughout the whole course of the film, the Neptune men really are outdone by the electric barrier and then eventually Space Sheep. The Neptune
Mhm.
men really at no point, by and large, during the film have been shown or given the opportunity to look like they're big baddies. In fact, they come off as being inferior in almost every way because they've never just been given the chance to like. Granted, yes, they destroy some cities towards the end, but they can't figure out a way through the electric barrier. Of course, they try transferring soldiers. That kind of partially works a tad, but not much. But they meet Space Chief, kind of like Starman. Space Chief is like Starman. And as a result, both are OP'd. The villains have no chance against these heroes. So, the villains kind of come off looking weak and incredibly incompetent.
Yeah, and that's sort of one of the reasons why I thought this was a Starman movie because the way how Iron Sharp looks like, it's not too different from Starman in a way, as
Not
far
too
as kind
much.
of the mini cape and stuff. The only difference is obviously the helmet or the headgear appearance, and when I saw the Starman, not Starman, Iron Sharp, um, for some reason, it sort of reminded me of Mirror Man in a way. For some strange reason, I'm guessing the headgear, because it sort of looks a bit similar in a way, or one of the other Ultramen that kind of has a separate headgear. But I'm not entirely sure the name of that specific Ultraman character. But yeah, it's the way that this film is portrayed is kind of gives off that Starman vibe in a way, which is why I was sort of confused at first, or I initially thought this was a Starman movie.
Okay, so kind of let's get into more general specific areas and discuss them. We already talked about special effects. I think you and I are in agreement that by and large the effects for this were pretty darn good. A little bit hokey maybe in a few areas, but by and large they work. So what are some things? Well, what do you make of the story? Like we said a couple times, it's a bare bones, basically invasion story. But what do you make of it? Like, thumbs up, thumbs down. Are you in the middle? Like, where are you on the story?
As far as the story on this one goes, I think for this day and age when this was released, I think it was at least pretty good for what it was. I would say around average, maybe a little, just barely above average. So for something like this, at least they sort of had something going for it. Besides with some of my earlier viewpoints on the overall thing of the movie. At least they sort of had a bare bones, pretty decent story to go off with.
Yeah, I'm gonna say as far as the story, it's basic. There's nothing really wrong with that. I just think again, I have a real issue with overpowered heroes. I don't want the villains to be overpowered either, and more or less, pull like a 2007 Transformers where like your big bad is so dominating that your hero can't even get a shot in. Um, that's kind of my biggest issue with the story is that the hero is just overpowered. Um, there are plot holes. There are a lot of questions I have about various aspects, including why all this, why did Space Chief all of a sudden decide to just disappear for a large chunk of the movie, including even the initial attack by the Neptune Men on the city, even though the electric barrier did a very good job of that. Why didn't Space Chief come in and be like, look, these Neptune Men are sitting ducks. Might as well just finish them off right here and right now. There's no explanation, no nothing. It's kind of frustrating and irritating on that front. But stuff like that, I can kind of just let it go for the most part. Um, it does linger a little bit here and there on a few moments. Nothing, overtly long. I would say though, but it's not as engaging as you'd like it to be. But I think for what they try to do, they did okay. I mean,
Hmm.
it's fine. Um, so, what do you? Let's. What are some things that you dislike about the film?
Well, like I said, the final part where they were having that final battle scene with the spaceships and everything, it just there wasn't really uh, well, I should say there was barely any dialogue throughout that entire part. It just that was the only part where I was spacing out quite a bit and was doing some other things during during that time when I was having the video sort of running in the background on YouTube while I was uploading a couple videos on our YouTube page and also watching college football game day uh, on the TV here, and that's like I said, it just made me sort of uh, space out and just not really pay much attention to the movie, especially with barely any dialogue towards the end there in the final fight, and just kind of the overall uh, part of the film that just wasn't really engaging at all. Even though the story was good, but just the way how they executed the film overall, they just didn't really bring you in.
Yeah, I mean, we're both in agreement on this too. The story is there to have some fun. It's just that they just drop the ball occasionally as far as trying to engage the audience. I would say that is indeed my biggest criticism of the film too. I would also say another criticism is they could have done better with Space Chief's uh, means of transportation. The tricked out car is kind of funny. It's nice for a chuckle. But they could have done better, including building like an immobile model of a rocket, or
Yeah.
something. I would have been okay with that. It's just that it looks really stupid.
And
Um,
and the other criticism I have besides the space car is the dubbing of the kids themselves because it seems like that they had some regular grown up guys trying to dub as some of the kids there. It just
Oh, absolutely.
That was one of the other things that sort of pulled me out of the film was
Well, we
was the
see,
dubbing of the kids.
the thing is that, you and I, we've been fans for almost 30 years when it comes to the kaiju genre and these sorts of films. I mean, we've noticed numerous times where you can tell in a lot of these films, yeah, you will um, have grown-ups dub kids. And in fact, if I remember correctly, I think in one of my books, I think they even had women dub children on occasion
Well, I know that
as
they
well.
have yeah, I know that they have women dub like some of the younger
Right.
adults or kids for anime.
Yeah, and that's nothing new. It does it pull you out, yeah, but at the same time, again, when you're young like we were there way back in the age of prehistoric man, certain things like that would not only pull you out, but it would bother you a bit too because people would make fun of it. And you're so serious because this is something that I love. And then as you get older, you usually learn to just kind of relax and like not take certain things. So like anybody who has been listening to us long enough and especially listen to us during our commentaries, God knows we make fun of that stuff all the time. We're
Oh
like
yeah.
an extension of Mystery Science Theater 3000. Not as great as Mystery Science Theater, I'm not saying that, but we're like them in that we will make fun of these movies, but that doesn't mean we hate them or we dislike them. We love them, but you know,
But
you can't take things overly seriously, and that's why, I've said it on this podcast, I think a couple times before, where people who take serious offense to the Lake Texarkana Gamera 2 dub really just need to take a chill pill. I mean, these are just movies for crying out loud. And
right.
who's to say that the people dubbing them hate the film? I mean, for crying out loud, it's ADV. That's, they're making money on this stuff. Why would they, make, like be at a point where they're like, hey, let's, we think these are stupid. Let's make fun of it. Like, apparently you don't have a problem with things like Mystery Science Theater 3000 or Rift Tracks, but yet somehow you have a problem with ADV doing, a Lake Texarkana dub of game. Like, people just need to learn to calm down.
But continuing on with the dubbing part, uh, there was quite a bit of areas as far as the English dub where it just felt like some of the dubbers didn't quite feel like that they were interested at all at times, and that was also one of the other reasons why I was kind of not engaged with the film a whole lot and just sort of spaced out and worked on other things or watched other things while that was still running in the background.
Well, and it's Walter Manley. I'm slightly in disagreement with you on this because I love those Starman films that they put together. They're not. Have we covered those yet? I know I wrote articles
I
on
don't
them.
believe we have yet. Not that
We
I'm
need to do
aware
that
of.
then. We need to do that at some point. I know those DVDs are getting harder to find. I don't know if they're on YouTube or not, but at some point we need to cover them.
Well, it looked
But
like was it Prince of Space? Was that a Starman movie?
no, it's not.
Oh, okay.
Um, but those movies are by no means perfect, meaning Starman. But they are, I think, a lot of fun. There's a lot of creativity. There's a lot of imagination behind them. Those were made by Shin Toho in the late 50s. I think they were 58, if I'm not mistaken. So they were fairly early in the Tokusatsu run, but they're a lot of fun. Yeah, they get a little goofy and silly and kind of absurd at points too, but they're a whole heck of a lot of fun. I think once we get to the point to where we cover them, I think Jason will enjoy particular aspects of those as well. Um,
Well, I know I've
but
seen
yeah,
Starman from time to time, especially when they
at
had
G
them
Fest, yeah,
over at G Fest. Yeah.
yeah. So now let's kind of end it on things we did enjoy. What are some things you did like?
Well, uh, we've already
Well,
talked about the
nothing really.
practical and visual effects, so that's that's the one thing that I liked. Yeah, other than that, um, I mean, Sony Chiba. That's probably one of the other good things about it. Well, and then I mentioned earlier about the suits for the Neptune Men. That was pretty cool. Like as stated earlier, it kind of reminded me of the Forbidden Planet in a way.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you on everything you said there. I would expand it also to areas like I enjoy the interior sets of the Neptune Men mothership. I think those were done. Shut up. I think those were done
What?
very well.
Don't tell me to shut up.
Did you hear that though?
Oh yeah, yeah, I heard it.
That was loud. Like, fuck, dude. Some of us are trying to podcast.
Anyways,
Um, but kind of lost my train of thought there for a moment. I did enjoy kind of the minor infiltration of the Neptune Men into the base in hopes of trying to destroy the electric barrier over the city as well. I did like that. Um, I I like the sci-fi ness of the film too. I like the fact that it's got rocket ships. You got a hero who's also an alien being with a unique um, suit and means of transportation. The aliens are pretty fun as well, including, like Jason said, their suits and their rockets. Um, laser beams. The fact that it's the sci-fi ness of the film too, in terms of its ideas and its concepts, are what I enjoy about it as well. And then I would say that probably the final thing that I enjoy most about this film is the destruction of the Hitler building.
bring that back, huh?
Yeah,
Well, I don't have anything else to
this
add
this is
after
a
that one.
movie. Yeah, I mean, this is a movie that's fairly straightforward. There's not a whole lot of nuance or layers to this film at all. So, unless you want to talk about something else, I would say let's just get into our final thoughts and our rating here.
Well, other than that, I was just sort of bored, mainly towards the end when they were having that long ass battle where there was barely any dialogue in there. But um, at least the story was there and was pretty good. But the execution of they just sort of missed the mark on it. It just felt like the staff behind it, they didn't quite know what direction to go with on there. Uh, the cast, uh, they sort of had a nice chemistry there from time to time, but overall, it they just didn't seem like there wasn't a chemistry there overall. Um, However, the practical and visual effects for this film was very good, probably the best part out of this entire film, and it looked like it aged very, very well. Um, and as well as some of the costume designs for it was really good. Also, sort of cheap in some areas. Face scar. um,
COVID.
but yeah, overall, Invasion of the Neptune Men, it just is just sort of a movie that's sort of uh forgetful in a way. Unfortunately,
Rating.
I would say I would have to do a a barely level pass on this one.
Okay. Yeah, I can understand why you would feel that way about the movie. I think you and I more or less saw the same thing, and I think we agree more or less on a lot of the same things. I kind of am in disagreement with you on a few areas. Like, I think the conclusion of the film, yeah, long. I find it interesting though still, and I know you said there's no dialogue, but the fact that the endings to movies kind of like this, you always want to have big action set pieces. I still kind of find it funny that you would complain about something like that, considering you were talking about how throughout much of the film you were not as engaged. Um, but I think Invasion of the Neptune Men is definitely a very flawed film for sure. There are a lot of questions that I walked away from, some of which I mentioned earlier in this discussion, as far as, are we supposed to, uh, believe that Sony Chiba's Tachibana character is indeed the space chief, or is this supposed to be a separate character and Sony Chiba just happens to play him? We're never no hints are ever given. Nothing was ever said either. I don't know. And there are just a bunch of other questions over the course of the movie that are not answered. And again, I think this was a film that was aimed more at a younger audience. Again, I know that doesn't um, that's not necessarily a good excuse for, even subpar writing, but still, I mean, we still see it even today. I mean, I got young kids. I still see it in some of their TV shows and their films where, certain plot elements are dropped or completely forgotten simply because they're like, well, that's kind of not what kids want or care for. So, this has been something that's been going on for a long time. Um, it's a mildly decent film, in my opinion. I think what happens here with Invasion of the Spacemen ends up being improved like 5 years later with Golden Bat. Golden Bat, in my opinion, is one of Toei's better science fiction movies that I have seen. That movie is by no means perfect either, but I see a lot of similarities between Invasion of the Neptune Men and Golden Bat. I One of the things, like I was
Yeah.
talking about earlier, was infiltration of the Neptune Men. We eventually get a little bit of that in Golden Bat as well. Both have Sony Chiba in them as well. There are, I think, in a general sense, quite a few similarities. I think it ends up becoming a bit more perfected with Golden Bat. Golden Bat is a significantly more fun and engaging film than Invasion of the Neptune Men.
Oh yeah.
Invasion of the Neptune Men tried, but I think, again, this was an early effort that they just were not entirely sure how to approach it. And as a result, you get a film that is very hit and miss in spots. And I'm not as, I guess, totally down on it as Jason is, but I think part of it for me is that because I'm also just a huge classic sci-fi movie fan as well, and really since the start of this month, I consider that the start of the Halloween season for me. I've been watching a lot of those older science fiction films. Some of them are A movies, some of them are B movies. I like that old timey stuff because I think the ideas were more creative than a lot of what we see today. I think today they are trying to become more artsy fartsy, for lack of a better term. Um, and I think they tried to have more fun with those types of films back in the day as well. I like the sci-fi-ness of it. I think it checks off that box decently well. I can go along with aesthetics and a general idea as well, as long as it's nothing that is just totally like flushed down the toilet or completely ignored. And it's not in this film. Um, I still think I think for Sonny Chiba fans, this is something you still might want to check out. It's some of his earlier work. This was a number of years before Sony Chiba became Sony Chiba. On top of that, though, too, just general kaiju fans, regardless of whether or not you're a big Sonny Chiba fan or not, um, I still think it's maybe worth a look. If you're a fan of kaiju movies and general tokusatsu films, and you haven't seen this one, I still think it's worth a look, just because there may be something here that you might enjoy. I'm not saying anyone is going to fall in love with it. Maybe there are some people out there, but I think the people who will fall in love with this are people who maybe did see it at a time in which they were younger and have a lot of nostalgia for it, and any young kids right now that see it. Maybe it'll click with them as well. I think for any adults, however, my voice is cracking. It sounds like I'm going through puberty. It seems like this happens almost every show
Zoinks!
now. um, but I think for those of us who are older fans at this point, I think most of us are going to walk away going, it's fine. It's not going to be a film we're going to watch every year or frequently at all. There are a few nuggets here, but nothing that is overly entertaining or exciting or memorable here. It's fine. And with that, I'm giving it a rent as my grade. I think there is just enough here that I think for Sonny Chiba fans and just general Tokusatsu fans, that I think this one is still worth a look. I don't think it hurts to look once at something. This is by no means the worst thing I've ever seen. It's not the worst Tokusatsu I've ever seen. It's fine. And in my book, that's still passable. Barely passable, but it's still passable. And so, with that being said, I want to give a quick update here on our schedule. Our next show is going to be October 2nd. We're going to have a later start time on that. We're going to be starting at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And during that one, it's going to be a commentary. This movie is also on YouTube. Aegon the Atomic Dragon. So we're going to be doing a commentary on that on October 2nd. And then 2 weeks after that, we're doing the Aegon discussion. So back-to-back episodes dealing with the same film. I think the last time we did that was with Godzilla vs. Kong earlier in the year.
Yeah, that was the case. And I think that this will be the overall discussion of Aegon on the 18th, I think, will be the last episode for about
16th.
For about a couple months.
Let me double check here. Yes, this October 16th will indeed be our last show up until December 18th.
Yep. Because I'll need the extra time to move out of this current place I'm in right now and get everything set up over at my new place back in Iowa. So and then also have much better internet at the time. So
we'll find out though. Mediacom. Oof.
Well, I'm not. I won't be getting Mediacom. I'll be going with Western Iowa Network. So I'm going to be getting.
I've never heard of them.
Gigabit fiber optic internet. So that'll be good.
And so just to kind of let everyone know the schedule for the rest of the year, as we said, October 16th is going to be our last show for a while. We're coming back December 18th, and on December 18th we're doing a War of the Gargantuas commentary. So we're just kind of easing in because Jason, I think, will still probably be unpacking during that time. And then we haven't decided on an official date yet. I have written down here either the 27th, 28th, 29th, or the 30th of December will be our year-end spectacular. That's still far a ways off. We're not going to worry too much about a date at the moment, but we will inform you all when that's going to occur and go from there. Maybe we'll try to get something ironed out by the time we do our show on the 16th, perhaps. So we still got like a month to figure that out. So, yeah. So, why did we not do a show on the 25th this month? Because we got 3 weeks.
Yeah. We'll just kind of leave it that way.
Oh, well. So, yeah, just kind of letting everyone know kind of what's up. There are only a few shows left. So yeah, you got a couple commentaries left, and then the year-end spectacular, and then we got one more discussion as well. So that's what we got going.
Yeah, and for our streaming, video streaming and everything, just make sure to like and subscribe to us on those video platforms and our other social media networks. As far as video platforms, you can follow us on Twitch, DLive, Facebook, Periscope, and YouTube. Even though we're having some difficulties as far as streaming onto YouTube, hopefully we try to get something working out, or possibly look elsewhere as far as other live streaming platforms. And you can also find us on the audio platforms as well, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and as well as Tune In. And you can also find us, uh, you can watch us live at our own website over at daikaijunetwork.com. So with that, yeah,
Thank you so much for joining us.
thanks for watching, and we will see you
Or
all
listening if this is an audio podcast.
on October 2nd. So, see you guys next time.